Hey, my name is Daphne, and I'm
And I'm
cut.
you are cut, and I'm Bonnie Violet, and I'm uncut. Sorry about that.
And basically, what this is all about is two friends who have recently, I say we've been friends for about what, 2 years? 2 years now?
Yeah, a couple years now, I think. Yeah, at least two.
And yeah, our journey has basically come to me being a post operative transsexual,
Hmm.
and Bonnie,
I'm not. I'm not even.
right?
I don't even know if
Pre-operative transsexual.
I'm
Would you say maybe
pre-op.
our pre-op?
I'm pre-op. I'm contemplating op. I mean, I don't even know what surgeries I'll have if I will, or
There's a
I'm
whole
still kind
bunch of them, child. You don't even have to do none of this.
of. I got plenty of time to figure that out.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So basically, I wanted to just welcome all of you to joining us in our podcast. For me, this has been a long 53 years of trying to find a brand for myself, trying to understand who I am as a person, knowing who I am, being comfortable in my own skin, and basically finding my voice to be okay with everything that goes on with me and the world of me. Does that make sense, Bonnie?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that gives me, because to me, you like you seemed to me like I think with somebody who's like newer in transitioning and things like that, like I know you get a lot of calls from me whether you like it or not, where
Of
like
course.
for me, I I just see you as like, and obviously we're all still growing and learning, but I just see you as so much more further along than me, I guess. And so
Yeah.
like so it's just meant the world to me to be able to just kind of come to you, because I think like as a trans person, it's been really easy for me to not be willing to like, or to think that I'm so unique or different, that when somebody who's not trans is talking to me about what I'm going through, that I'm really reluctant to like receive it. Do you know what I mean?
No, can you
Yeah.
go
So like,
give a little detail in that? Because I'm
I
not
don't know.
really.
I think just where I'm at, my transness is such a big part of my life right now. I feel like it's all I really think about, and it's what I want to talk about. But when I'm
Yeah.
talking to people who aren't trans, I don't trust that they really understand what I'm talking about, and they can't really like call me on my shit, or they can't say like, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about," and like that's something that like you've been able to do with me that's been really helpful. Like you've said shit to me that um I'm like, what the like gosh. But then once I've really like thought about it, it's really kind of what was going on for me,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I've been, Bonnie, like I was saying, I have been transitioning. Well, let's just say I kind of knew that I wanted to be a girl since I was two. So my mom used to tell me stories about me being fascinated with ladies' stockings, and I'd always go and hide and pretend I was Jeannie and put T-shirts on my head, and say I was Jeannie, or when we would play as children, we play superheroes. I had to be Wonder Woman. As you can see, I had to be Wonder Woman.
right.
So I've always identified as female. So that's always been my thing. My only prayer in life was let me wake up and please be a girl, Lord. You know what I mean? So I had a hard road coming up in Chicago, because I know that's another thing why we are so different, because I grew up rural and you grew up
Or other way around.
yeah.
You were urban.
I'm
I was
urban
rural.
and you're rural, yes.
Yes, yes,
So it
yes.
was a little more, I don't know, was it rough for you growing up, but you didn't really identify as trans as a child or even have these problems, did you?
Right.
I
Yeah,
don't.
I mean, yeah, it was, yeah, I mean, I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but as I do remember a lot of my problem, like I never saw myself as a trans person or as a girl, because I didn't know, I think it was possible. Like I didn't know there was such a thing, I guess. Um, but I was constantly being corrected. Like my father was always telling, I was feminine, and my dad was always like kind of correcting that, trying to tell me like
Mhm.
not be so soft, basically, to like watch where I put my hands and don't stand like that or sit like that or speak up, or, he never was saying like,
Definitely
stop.
had the makings of a little girl.
Exactly. Which was just like my natural nature. But I think because and again, I blocked out a lot of my childhood. So I don't know if maybe I had these ideas or beliefs or thoughts when I was younger, and somehow they got like kind of like scared out of me, so to speak, or other things in life happened that kind of just caused me to check out, to where I'd never really like reconnected with that idea until like my 40s. And then once I was in my 40s and I was like, I said, like, I don't know, it was weird. Like once I saw it and I could see it like
Yeah.
throughout my whole
There's
life.
no denying.
Yeah. Yeah, there was like no turning back.
Yeah. So did you play with dolls like I did when you were little? Did you play with Barbies and?
No, I mean, we had like, I mean, kind of, but they weren't Barbies. They were like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and He-Man. Those were the ones that were okay to
Yeah.
play with. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so, yeah, I mean, I think I was more girly in the sense of like, I always wanted to hang out with like my mom and my grandma. And I always wanted to be indoors and I wanted to like make things, like I was a little bit more
Bake,
crafty.
cook.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
just liked hanging out with mom and grandma a lot more than like, I just didn't really understand my father and my grandpa and like the men in the family. I didn't like the same things they liked. And so, I
Yeah.
don't know, I just never felt comfortable in those environments.
Yeah. And did you have, like I did, I guess I had cousins that supported me, it was just between us little kids, like, okay, well, you could play the girl, or you know what I mean? You could do, but for us, but for adults, it was not, it was very frowned upon. My mother would be like, quit laughing, like, quit acting like a girl, quit giggling in there, go to bed.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was, don't hold your hand like this, and why you switching, and so the kids in my family understood me,
Right.
but it was still a tease. I was still called sissy, and hopefully, the way that the world is now, that little kids don't have to go through that anymore,
Right.
because it's rough out here as it is. So
Yeah.
to
So
go
you
through
really
that.
so you identified with being a girl? Did you say you were a girl to like your cousins and stuff, or were you just kind of took on the girl roles and things?
Well, I didn't say I was a girl. They always say you a girl. You know what I
Mm.
mean? You acting like a girl, or But I always played female roles. Like when we played, you know, playtime. My sister and I, for example, used to play Veronica and well, I forget her name, Veronica and Betty from Archie's. I would have
Uh-huh.
to be Veronica. I always identified as the sassy one. So I've always identified in female roles, even as a child, and growing up through that and getting bullied and whatever. I never lost faith of that part of me, even though I got beat for it a bunch of times. I
Yeah.
never lost faith of who I am. And to believe that that's even possible to these days is a miracle for these children,
Right.
because we went through some shit.
Yeah. Well, and when did you like realize, or when did trans or you being a girl really come into your mind?
Well, I have to say, I was 16. I was in high school, and I, in high school, I was deathly, by the way, I was deathly afraid of going to high school as a teenager. I just knew they were gonna beat the hell out of me in high
Mm.
school, because of the terrifying, elementary school. I thought I couldn't take another, So, but I guess high school, when the diversity came in and more, you have the headbanging children. These were our what do we call it? Our pronouns back then.
Okay.
Headbangers. Then we had what were we? The weirdos, I guess. I don't know what we call it. We new wave. I think we called the new wave kids. And you had your jocks and your cheerleaders. Well, I identified more with the cheerleaders and the pom pom girls and the volleyball team. So I
Mhm.
always had those, and I was always embraced for those. So then I had friends that were, oh, let's go to the alternative club. So these alternative clubs gave me other options to meet other people that are already in the life. And
Mhm.
there was a place that was called Horizons here in Chicago, which is now a huge, you already know about Howard Brown. No, not Howard Brown. It's called Concept Center. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but before, back in the day, it was this place where I could be okay with who I am. And I met people like me. And through these people, I met trans girls like Sylvia Del Rio and Chanel Dupree and Elise Betty. And that, I was like, what?
Right.
You know, these were like seeing Mona Lisa on, you know, and these girls have, you know, breasts, and they were soft and gorgeous, and, you know, they were like, oh, you know, they're so feminine in their ways, you know, with their Latin fire, and, you know, they took me under their wings and like, oh, but okay, sweetie, if this is what you want to do, this is what you got to do. Yeah, but in their mind frames, they were thinking about protecting their own. And that's what we call houses today. That's why I'm part from the House of Dupree, because I come from a lot of the Duprees. Here in Chicago, we have Betty Dupree, we have Chanel Dupree, we have Maria, and then we have our, you know, Elise. So we have our own original House of Dupree here in Chicago. And that often brought me to women in the Baton Show Lounge, where I got to experience more of these women. And I started hormones without my family even knowing at 16.
Oh, so, wow. Yeah, it's interesting for me. It's interesting how we both, because I grew up in a small town in Idaho, but my first kind of introduction to trans community was when I moved to Chicago, and I started working at the Center on Halstead, which is formerly Horizons. So it's like we both kind of introduced to the trans community in the same place. And I remember moving there and thinking like, oh my God, everybody here is trans. Like there's just, you know, there's trans and most were like Black and brown girls. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, like for me, like it's interesting that was both of our introduction, if you will, into the community. And it was what, probably 20 years.
20-year difference, yes.
Because I was like 33-ish.
This was in the 1980s. This was in the 80s.
Yeah, so
in the 80s for me.
It's so wild that we lived. I mean, we come from such different backgrounds, but we were introduced like to the community in like the same way.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show you, we used to always say back home that we were 10 years behind in everything. So that was like fashion, disease, like, you know, because we were like small town white folk, I guess, you know what I mean? And so this sort of like, we're just behind everybody else. And so I guess I was 20 years behind. I always thought it was just 10, but I guess it was closer.
But you're right on time. You are right on time, at least for me in my life. So I'm so grateful to have you, you know. Because like I said, this has been something I've always wanted.
I feel that I would love to hear a little bit more about like, so how did you get into like being a Dupree?
Oh, Chanel Dupree, Miss Chanel. So like I said, Horizons had this talent show for teenagers, you know, in our teens. I'm 14, 15, and I'm sneaking out of the house with my bag of drag, you know, and my cousin, she always just says, I know you used to always sneak out with my purse and my shoes and stuff in that bag if you used to go outside with. She jokes about that to this day. And but we would go to Horizons, and I was doing a talent show, and I was wearing lingerie, and I was gonna do Donna Summers, and there was this other girl who was there named Betty. And Betty was going to do Madonna. She had dancers and everything, sweetie. She was, you know, she was killing the game back in the day. So neither one of us had any lick of hormone whatsoever. But Betty is biologically related to Chanel. So this family actually has three trans boys from their family. And that's how I was introduced into it. And then they were like, well, you got to start taking hormones now, and you got to get your testosterone, you know, your testicles cut. And at that time, like, I ain't cutting what? You know what I mean? But I didn't know until I seen Chanel come home for Christmas from Miss Continental and from all these other things that, you know, she was doing. You know, she's legendary. So
So did you feel
she had
like
just
they
got,
saw?
huh?
Sorry. No, go ahead.
No, she had
She
just
just.
gotten reassignment, and so she came home and for the holidays, and I was there for the because I had moved in with this family, and they had took me to a doctor that was black market where we could get hormonal therapy at this time. He would shoot us with the injection for $10.
Hmm.
Where am I going to
And
get this $10 from? Is the next question. You probably got that.
well, and that at that point, then you were 16. Like you did that.
I started, yeah, I was 16. I had been hormoning for 16 and still going to high school. So
So
yes, I was hormoning at 16.
got you. And so at that point, had you left home?
I had left home around, I'd say 16, because I had just, it was weird how I transitioned from home. My mother was struggling with alcoholism, and it was just a rough patch of my life for me. And I don't want to tell her story here, but it was for me, from my side of it, I felt abandoned. I felt, sleeping in the hallways, and I didn't really have a home. So
Right.
these people took me into their homes to help, and I slept on their floors, and they let me live with them and fed me so I could get up every morning and go to school. And then I got into you know um hanging out
More.
with gay
Yeah.
people, and then I got a sugar daddy, and then the sexual escapades started happening. And I moved from the gay world into the trans world, so that was a very quick transition, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I remember like you referred to the life, which is I don't know that like everyone knows that term and what that term means, especially folks who aren't part of our community. Like I remember I first heard the term of the life. I remember I was like in my early 20s and I was actually in Atlanta, and I was there for a conference. I was like, it was a huge culture shock for me. It was my first time there, and I was stuck in Atlanta with no money, no credit cards, no nothing. And I
mhm.
remember I was like walking around on the street to try to, I think I was trying to find something to eat. And this person came up to me and was like,
Oh
"Hey,
no.
like, are you of the life?" And I was just like, "What do you mean the life?" And then I got kind of educated a little bit about what the life is. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the life
Yeah.
is?
Well, the life predominantly, and probably when people join us, they can really give us a better definition of what it means to them. But the way that I perceived the life was being in the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
That is being in the life, meaning that you are an alternative style lifestyle. That is in the life. And I took that as being a gay lifestyle, not a trans
Yeah.
lifestyle, being in a gay lifestyle.
Yeah.
So
And is the life is more, is that more of like, is it origins from the Black community? Because I kind of
I would have
sense
to
that.
predominantly say it came from the Black community. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah. I
definitely.
when I talked with this person, I believe they said that there was like a book or something that was somebody had written about the life or something like that. And maybe I'm just not
Maybe you
recalling.
heard about the written, but I lived it.
No,
So,
I
but
know.
that's how we called it. There was in an area of life where Chicago, we predominantly had house music. And this was a much
Mm,
older crowd than me because I was just coming into my teenage years. So this is my sisters. They were like 2 or 3 years ahead of me. And this is what the terms that they use for being in the life. And that referred to being with house music and alternative lifestyle. And that's with the house music. And then the gay scenes like the Rialtos of Chicago,
right, right.
and the gay dance scenes and things like that. That's where we picked up the word the life from for me.
Yeah. And when you're
So
talking about like being a part of a house, was it a ball house or a pageant house, or was it even attached to anything like that?
believe it or not, Chanel was about in the New York life. And that's where I got, because I was just a teenager. I never been to New York about the house balls. And I didn't even really learn about that until I moved to New York, like 30. I was like 30 or something at the time. But we called ourselves the House of Dupree because we were all family. So we called ourselves, because that was Chanel's last name, Dupree. So
Hmm.
she was the original from the original House of Dupree in New York, but we came from the Duprees here in Chicago because of her lineage. So
Got
that's
you.
where the House of Dupree comes from for me, because I was
And
brought up
so
in the house of
the ball,
Chanel.
was there a
Hmm?
ball scene then? Was there a ball
No.
scene? No.
Well, if you want to call it a ball scene, we just called it Cheeks. That was a club we used to go to called Cheeks, where all the girls would get together and we would prance in the mirror and, be gorgeous and have shows, and we would pick up dates. This is where we would
Mm.
have
Where,
men that are interested in women like me would go and pick up girls like me to go get my hormone money. So that's what I was
right,
taught
right.
to do.
Well, and where, like, what part of Chicago was that in? The
North
Cheeks,
Side, Boys
North Side,
Town,
Boys
North
Town
Side,
area.
Diversey. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, that was
It's so
a lot of fun.
wild.
I mean, fun back for now as an adult, but as coming up and growing
Mhm.
up that lifestyle, it was terrifying. I had some girls that were murdered. I had some
Mm.
friends that were murdered. I've had girls that have been beat up and killed for money for trying to get their hormones, trying to get their work done, just trying to be comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
And, shady shit happens to us, and that's a whole nother story. But, growing up as a
Whole nother
teenager, I had to
episode.
keep my head, yeah, I had to keep my head down, because I did not have the breast. I did not, you know what I mean? And these girls were breasted up and nose jobs, and they had tricks that were taking them across the world to get this work done, and I had to have it. I had to have it.
Okay. Well, and I think back in that time too, like passing in stealth and like looking like a woman as much as possible was really important. And a lot of that was around safety, or what would you say that was for you? Or
For me, that's what was ingrained in me from my house mother, Chanel. She was like, you need to start young.
Mm,
Because if you're clocked, and that's the word clocked, I don't know if y'all know a lot about the word clock, but clock means
I
if they
do,
can
but
tell
other
that you
folks
were a
do not.
man and not passing, you're going to get beat down.
Mhm.
So it was important for me to learn to get my hormonal therapy young. So I did this without even telling my parents. I was chewing my sister's birth control pills, and she probably said, "That's what my damn birth control pill." No, but
He's
but
watching to be like, oh,
right, like that, you owe me. No, but I was trained to do it well. When I could get out there in the streets and make money, I would go out and make money because I had to get that hormonal therapy. I had to get, and my family noticed, like, you look young for your age. And I just
mhm,
stopped aging at a certain age. I think I stopped aging at 16. And
yeah.
that's when the woman would come around, or the trans woman would come around, and she would pump the children. And
Mm.
when I say the children, that's our in terms of endearment for that's what we should have named our subscribers, the children. I
The
love
children.
We
We
should have
still can't.
called them the children. Ooh, thank you
Right.
for the children for supporting our page.
Mhm.
But yeah, so
So it's
that's
not a
what it
bunch of
was.
toddlers or first graders.
No, it's not a bunch of those kind of children. Yeah, get that out there. When people are like, those poor children.
Right. No, that's not what we're
No,
talking
not
about.
those children. Children like gay boys and gay girls and, b-boys, and, those are our
Mhm.
children. Those are my children. Those are what we call as trans queens children, our children, because
Right.
they're learning from us. So they're our children, like you, my children's.
Exactly. And some of us are like a little bit older, but we start our life, our queer life later. So we're kind of like, in our teens or 20s when we're really just babies and
Mm-hmm.
figuring like, who we are and what we
Yeah.
do and really being introduced to this world that we weren't necessarily raised in, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
When
thank
did you
God we do have. The world has changed so much. I mean, it's so positive, but yet so scary, because
Yeah.
we had to live in the damn shadows. You know what I mean? You could not be me back in the 80s like this and be able to work at, where I work, or be
Right, right.
able to have a full-time job and go to school and be comfortable in my own skin, and sit on the bus without people staring at you or getting up. And not because I'm black, Bonnie, just put that.
Right. Well, I mean, but that's like a whole nother layer of your experience that I don't have, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Would you
I still get some of that though. I still get some of that, but that's a whole nother episode for us to get into that too.
a whole
But
nother conversation out? Would you say
yeah.
I feel like and like I'm kind of newer into this world and I've kind of come into the world in our politics is a really interesting time. And I live in Idaho where, it's, they are like trying to make doing drag illegal, which is kind of a way to get
Hmm.
to trans people. And there's just a lot, it's a very different kind of political setting. But
Hmm.
it's like even just in talking to some of the trans folks who've been here for a while, a lot of them have kind of in the last couple years kind of went back, not necessarily in hiding, but they're definitely like a lot more fearful about being out in public. Would you say that's changed for you over the years, or it continues to just get better and better, like say in Chicago or in your experience?
Well, it's changed a lot for me, but that's
Hmm.
because of the gender dysphoria in here. Um,
Yeah.
because once you get the sex change, I got my birth certificate changed. I got a lot of things that happened for me differently than it would for someone that didn't have those things. Like in my mind, if I went to go get a job and my um, paperwork, that you have to give your ID says Calvin or something, it would set off some alarms and stuff. So it
Yeah.
has ways to not be that, but it shouldn't be that. But and then there are ways where people have made so many strides in life to be okay wearing makeup to work and not having to change your name or whatever, being comfortable with who you are the way you are. And
Right.
that's what bothers me, is that somebody can tell you at this day and age who you can and cannot be when
Mm.
they have not even walked in your shoes or have eaten at your table or have experienced anything in your life to sit behind a table and push and judge you for who you are. That
Mm.
to me is unacceptable. So for somebody to try to push a law that says that you cannot be creative or let your spirit soar and let your colors shine, to me, it's somebody that is afraid of who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
And
way
I
that I
think,
see it. And I ain't scared to tell them. Yes, I am. No, I'm just
yeah, I agree. No, I agree with you. And I think that might be because I did grow up here. I grew up in a small town here in Idaho. And so, and when I was younger, like I said, I didn't even know necessarily about a trans community or a queer community growing up. Like I just had no clue about it. I remember I met my first lesbian when I was a senior in high school and I went to work in the big city of Boise. I was in the House of Representatives as a page one summer and I got to live with a sponsor family and I met my first lesbian, like, on the bus, it
the
was just
scandal
like,
of it
oh
all.
my God, you know what I mean? Like, because I wasn't exposed to it. It was a different time, like you said, the 90s or, like we're like I guess we are about like 8 years difference, right? Because I'll be 45 next month. You said you're 53. So we're like just under 10 years difference. So, but we grew up around the same time, but we were like in completely different cities. So like our
Yeah.
experience were just vastly different. And I think that's a big reason why maybe I didn't, why it took me so long to begin my transition, because there was so much like programming and cultural and like things that I
You
just wasn't.
didn't have the opportunities that I had. You didn't
Yeah.
have a Medusa's down the block. You didn't have, you know what I
Medusas.
mean? Yes.
Medusas. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What's a Medusa?
Oh, you don't know what Medusa's is?
No. What's a
Medusa's was, anybody in Chicago will tell you, both the most alternative club for teenagers back in the day for non-alcohol. It was called Medusa's. This is in the
uh,
Boys Town. All of this is in Boys Town. This is where um, Horizons was right next door to Medusa's, where you could
uh,
dance all night and not drink, so it stayed open all night. So when
mm,
Medusa's was around, everybody came. It was for everybody. 3 floors of neon lights and alternative music and
oh
house
wow.
music downstairs and Latino punk music upstairs and punk music on the 3rd floor. We had everybody in there. And that is where the opportunities were for us. I don't think you had those opportunities where you were, did you?
No, not at
Unless
all.
it was.
Yeah, no, nothing that, yeah. I mean, anything that was queer was probably very much, behind closed doors and definitely not talked about for sure. It was interesting because I know because Chicago is a huge, very diverse city, but it's also kind of has a history of being like really segregated. And there's a lot of, I don't know if racial tensions is the right idea, but
It's the
it
right
was
idea.
it was interesting in how but you were also talking about at that time where it sounded like this club was a place that everybody could mix, like within the queer community. Was race as much of a, I don't know, was it a different
It
experience, did
wasn't
you
even
feel?
just queer. It was everybody.
Mm,
It was everybody. It wasn't just queer. It was where everybody could be accepted because you had your punk kids, you had your alternative crew, and then they'd all go down the block and hang out at Dunkin' Donuts. And there was a place where
gotcha.
you can hang out. You know what I mean? It was
Mhm.
just an area of town that was kind of like some people would say to artsy. I guess the artistic area
Mhm.
where we could just be creative and just be a
So
teenager and
Medusa's,
not worry about race or tension or parents. We just raised ourselves in the 80s, I
so
guess.
right, so Medusa's wasn't necessarily like a queer club, but that's where a lot
Mm-mm.
of queer went.
Mm-mm. It was an
Got
alternative club for everybody because you had all straight kids was there. Everybody was there.
Yeah.
Now the
Wow.
Center Hallstead was where the queer kids hung out next door.
Right, at the Horizons or whatever, right?
Yeah. So tell me
It's
about you, Bonnie. I've been talking. Like, tell me where you first decided where she came from.
oh, yeah, I mean, I didn't really start, Bonnie Violet was actually first my drag name.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like drag was kind of my introduction into really starting to like find, like really, I think connect more with this feminine part of me that had always been there. It's like, I remember when I got into drag, and I didn't start doing drag until I tried drag when I was like 19, 20 years old, when I was 20
Mm-hmm.
years old. And at that time, I think I just couldn't mentally, I was like just barely kind of sort of coming out as I thought I was a gay boy because I thought that was really the only option. And plus, I think I just had a bunch of internalized like transphobia and homophobia or whatever was going on with me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
was living in Phoenix at the time and I had an opportunity to do drag. And so like, but I had a hard time because the guys that would hit on me when I was a boy would hit on me when I was in drag. And I was just like, it just messed with my head because I was like, I don't want you to think that I want to be a girl. I want you to think I'm a dude who likes dudes,
Oh, you
like
got hard with that.
I did. That was
Dude.
that was no that was totally my like that was my attitude. I was like a dude who fucks dudes. Like that was I know it's so crazy. But and the fact that it was so like charged just speaks to how much of it was
Yeah.
me like fighting um like this part of who I was and really
Yeah.
trying to control the narrative of how people saw me because and yeah, like even just being, I'd rather be seen just as a gay boy at that time. That was better, even though I was just coming to understand that, than being seen as a trans person in
Yeah.
my mind at that point in time. It took me a long time to really um, be able to really like, I don't know, engage in that again. And I didn't do it until my early 40s after I had, gotten sober for a while and was introduced to drag through the sober community in San Francisco. And that's really
So
kind of where Violet came about.
so let me ask you something. And this is, so did you come out to your parents twice or did you just come out as like how was this coming of you?
Yeah, I mean, I told so the first time I came out to my parents was in 1999, which at the time I had just turned 20 and I had gotten diagnosed with HIV. And
Oh
so
wow.
it was
Yeah.
May of 1999, and
So you
my
came out with your parents, and that was your first
yeah, like
coming
I
out
had
story
only
to your parents?
I turned 20 in February, like the end of February, and then I kind of was like, okay, you're a fag, like figure it out, like I didn't know what it meant to be gay, so I got a job at a gay bar, like to learn how to be gay, and then a couple months later in May, I was diagnosed with HIV, and so
Mhm.
that kind of pushed me out of the closet, so to speak, to where like I felt like I had to, because I thought I was just going to die, because I didn't understand like I just didn't know anything about HIV and AIDS. The only thing I
Mhm.
knew was like the movie Philadelphia, and so it
Very
scared me.
scary movie, by the way.
Yeah, and I also was conflicted because I was young, I was like not sick looking yet, and so it was this weird sort of thing. But I had to tell, I knew I needed to tell my family because I was still like 20, so I was young. I was still growing up in a small town, growing up with my family. I was always really close to my family, and so
Mhm.
I just felt like
Mhm.
I owed it to them, one, to tell them right away, and two, like I needed their support. And so I went home to Idaho because I was living in Phoenix at the time, and I told them that I was gay and that I had HIV, all on the
Mhm.
same night. um,
Just rip the band-aid off.
yeah, yeah, and then yeah, it was quite the thing. And then like I didn't come out. I came out with being trans to my family about 3 years ago, and it was a very different scenario. Like my dad had a hard time with me saying I was gay, but he still like acknowledged me. Like he still gave me a hug when I left town, but he wouldn't really acknowledge it, but he didn't. I
Mhm.
don't know. He didn't let it come between us, I guess, right? And I
Yeah.
always thought maybe that was because I was HIV positive and he was scared that I would die, and so he didn't have time to be an asshole or what. I don't know, but that was kind of what I was thinking. But now, when I told my dad and my mom that I was trans, my dad wouldn't hear it. He stopped the conversation as soon as I started to say it, and just he's never talked to me again in like over 3 years.
My conversation with my mom, I think I was 18, I think it was, because my whole father thing, that's a whole nother um,
Mm.
topic for one of our other.
Right.
But my mom's always been my supporter. She has her own troubles and battles, and she was a young mother. She had me at 18, and she struggled with alcoholism and doing what an 18-year-old mother thought she could do
Right.
at that time. So me coming out wasn't about me being gay. I never told her I was gay at all.
Mm.
I came out after I was on hormones for 2 years and told her that I wanted to be a woman. And she was like, well, I knew you liked men, but and she goes, but I didn't know you wanted to be a girl. And she was like, now, are you going to be like that person on Silence of the Lambs?
Oh,
And she
wow.
was referring to put the lotion in the basket. That I think that was her only take on what a trans person was.
Wow. Yeah.
So but after that, she said, I'm going to mourn my son,
Mm.
and I love you, and whatever makes you happy, I will support.
Wow.
And I didn't see that coming
Mhm.
because we have had a rocky relationship, but it's never been about me being trans. It's always about me being a hard-headed ass student or
Person.
child of hers, basically not listening to her. She'll tell you right now, it goes in one ear and out the other one. And then her words for me is a hard head makes a soft ass.
Oh,
So I've never listened to anything that my mother said, and to this day, I'm glad. No, I'm just kidding. I value her opinion. We're really good friends right now, but I think having that support really helps the world.
mm.
I think if parents could open up or let us be comfortable to have these uncomfortable conversations,
Yeah.
um, it would be a whole nother ball game. And I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that some parents are letting their children have these uncomfortable conversations and letting them know that they have, the people in our lives that identify differently, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, like, no shade really with my parents, but I know I do feel like I have had a harder time with feeling safe in the world, or I think even embracing my transness,
Mhm.
because of not having that sort of connection, like support, feeling supported from my
Yeah.
family. Like, sometimes I wished it didn't affect me in the way that it did, but I
Hmm.
do think if like my parents could be different or
Yeah.
like accept I was trans, I think it would help me not be so scared of like the world as a whole. Do you know what I mean?
Completely. And that's the thing, the uncomfortableness of having a parent's love, even if you don't accept it, have the conversation anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
See where the opportunities don't, see where we could, okay, well, if the conversation went like, I don't understand, help me understand.
Right.
What are you feeling? Ask these important questions. And if you don't support it, say, I don't support it. These are my
Yeah.
reasons why I don't support it. But let's have this conversation, because
Conversation.
either
Yeah.
way it goes, you have no power over what that child decides. You're probably
Agree.
going to either make a child miserable, or you're going to make yourself miserable, and then it's not going to work. Or you're going to
Yeah.
have this uncomfortable with this. The child will probably
Mm.
never have this conversation. And again, I'm prophesizing. I don't know. I can't speak for other people, but I speak for me that if my mother did
Totally.
not have that, I would have done it anyway. And then I would have cut her out of my life. And I'm so grateful I didn't have to do that.
Yeah. 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 I think that's like the truth of it all. And I know like some of my challenge with that too is like I've also had a hard time really letting my family, you know what I mean? Like I've had a hard time too with like being unsure of how to bring my transness, if you will, or to be trans with my family. I know that it's like I've had moments of not really knowing how to, but also like I can't help but be who I am,
Well,
and
let's
I love.
unpack that. Why did you not have that type of relationship, that you felt uncomfortable to have that?
It's really interesting because I've always felt like I've had that with my family until I started to transition. And then that's when it all changed. Because even when I was just a faggot and I was a person living with HIV and even somebody who got
We're
sober
not
from
going to
drugs,
say faggot. We're going to say a gay male, because
I
we don't
didn't mean it.
identify.
I
I
didn't
love
mean it
this.
in an offensive way, but
Right. I know what you're saying. I feel you.
my family still like showed up for me, and I was allowed to come to the house, and they've never once not really shown up for me. And so that was the thing that was really shocking to me, is that
Yeah.
this has created some sort of hesitation, or finally I've been too much, you know what I mean? And so I think that's what shocked me the most, is because they have not always understood me or agreed with
Hmm.
what I was doing with my life, but they've always still kind of like loved me and told me they loved me. And my mom is, and that there's definitely just, we don't know what to do with one another. Like
Yeah.
I'm not okay with not talking about, like, I don't know, like I'm just at a point in my life where like I want you to see me, and I want you to see what I'm going through right now, and right now with my transition, like that's a big part of my life. I'm excited for a day when me being trans is just like whatever, like it's not even a thing for me even. But it is right now, and so it's really hard to be in relationships with people
It's because
who.
you're new with
Exactly.
it. That's
So I think
why.
that's really been the challenge for me, is just,
Hmm.
I don't know, with that. Because I know my family loves me, and I know that they just, you know what I mean? I just know that it's
Yeah.
it's it's just something that we've just never done before, and don't know how to do it, I guess. I
Yeah.
don't know.
So the other part I wanted to speak to was like when we talk about um, being comfortable in your own skin. Is that something that you struggle with still to this day, or?
Yeah, it's so wild. Yeah, I do it a lot more than what I would like to admit. But I think you've actually pointed that out to me a couple of times where you felt like there's some like I'm holding myself back. I think I'm leaning more and more into this like, and I think accepting that I'm trans, you know, like I think there's just an element of like it's taken me a while because I remember a while back you saying like, girl, well, you haven't really committed. Like you haven't really like, you know what I mean? You just haven't really owned it yet.
Yeah.
And I do think it's taken me a little while. I think because I didn't even really recognize it until later in life. And there's just so much of that programming that I'm
Yeah.
really trying to work through. And then being in an environment where I don't have a lot of the supports. When I was just a queer person, or I was, you know, much of my life, I've had people around me and supporting me, and I felt connected. And this has been, though it's weird how like I feel most connected to like I feel more connected to myself, and I'm like in my body more than I've ever been in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like I'm more alone than I've ever been. Um, and part of that is because my transness and me feeling like I can't relate to other people, or other people still trying to adjust to who I was to them at one point and then who I am now. Because, and for a long time, I was thinking, like, well, I'm the same person, but the truth of it is, I'm not, you know, and
That's
that's
right.
like,
That's right.
and I think
You're
that's
not.
something that it took me a minute to really just like, no, like I am different. And like, that's
Mhm.
not a bad thing. And
No, it's not.
it
And you're going
doesn't
to
negate.
continue to be different. And everyone in
It's
the world continues to be different because we evolve every day from our circumstances. We learn a little bit every day. I think every person in the world needs to understand that we are organic.
mm,
And
right.
when I speak of organic, you have to think of it like yourself as a seed in a whole garden, or if you will, a whole tundra of grass, and then there's trees, and then there's, you know what I mean. But you don't
Yeah,
hear this big tree telling that little piece of daisy over there, you can't be that color. You know what I'm saying?
right.
It's just the law of nature does not work that way. And
Yeah, yeah.
every bit of it should have its own origin. And I think that even every little flower needs to learn how to spread its seeds, or how to learn how to bloom, and which direction of the sun that is going to go in that day to get the most nourishment that they need. You have to think of yourself that way, but it doesn't happen overnight. It has to be like we do in our recovery. You have to learn to peel off the layers,
Yeah.
and that comes with being trans. We have to pull back those uncomfortable layers, and we have to be naked in our own essence of the raw spirit. Where were these things coming from? Where am I relating? Why am I feeling this way? And if you can get in there in that and clear out all that muck from life stuff that you heard and what people have pushed on you and the fears, you're blossoming because you're being comfortable to peeling those layers now. You're being comfortable to have those uncomfortable conversations. You're meeting people, like-minded people that have the same type of flower origin that you have. You know what I mean? You're learning
Yeah.
what
Well,
steps
yeah.
people took to blossom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's where you are. You're just budding. And you have to give yourself that time to bloom. That's the way that
Mhm.
it was taught for me. You have to bloom. And I always tell you, you're blooming, Bob. You're blossoming, girl.
Yeah.
I see
I
your
hear
little cheeks flushing and you get all cute. So like
she's
Olivia Newton-John, not
trying a
Suzanne
little.
Summers.
I feel like I'm getting there little by little, you know,
You
like
are. You are.
feeling like a little bit more comfortable in my body and willing to. That's one of the things that I'm excited about this particular podcast and these conversations that we're having is that we can kind of begin to lean into some of this, and I can practice being a little bit more, I guess, comfortable in my blooming, if you will.
Blossoming, yes.
Blossoming, yes. Because I feel a lot more. Sometimes I get in drag, or I wear drag, and I feel safer, or you know what I mean. I feel like I can control, and I'm more happy. I think with
because it's safe.
The end results. Like I'm not at my end result yet. I'm in that in between space, and so it makes me feel insecure, and like I don't want to be seen, but that's okay. Like it's part of the process.
It's part of the process, and let me give you an example of that. I still go through it. I was at a club the other night with a girlfriend of mine, this lesbian couple, who that I adore. They're also in recovery, and I adore these girls. And one of them is in a band, and she was playing in a club. First of all, I don't do clubs anymore because I just don't feel there's anything for me, but I want to support my friends. So I went. Child, when I tell you, walking in there, I'm the darkest thing in there. Black. I'm probably one of the tallest in there. I'm 5'10". And my response is I can immediately feel people are staring at me like, you don't belong here. Or, why is this trans girl? Or, but you know what? I stopped myself and I said, hey, you know what? That's all in here, because you don't even know if that's what that is. Because ain't nobody approached you to say anything like that to you. So relax. And once I breathed and understood, it's all in my head. The music started to come. I started to bop a little bit, and I started to wiggle and be aware of my surroundings and enjoy myself.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do with life in general. Until somebody comes in and tries to interrupt that, it's in here. But if you don't have no proof of it, if you don't have no proof of it, continue to live, continue to move forward until you get into an obstacle where you need to remove it or figure out a way to go around it or go under it. However, you need to get over it, but it needs to be passed so you can move on to your next level.
Yeah,
and that's
I agree.
and that's what this journey is.
It's helpful to hear that. I hate that that's your experience, but it's helpful to hear that it's still something that you can catch yourself getting into, and you have to remind yourself so that, because I think sometimes I do get into this point where I'll like kind of be disappointed in myself or upset with myself because I know like a lot of my fear and anxiety, it's what's happening in my head, and it's maybe not as true as what's really happening around me. And I can't seem to shake that. And so, you know what I mean? Like, so then I should, and I feel like I should, because I'm like 44 years old, and I'm like, I feel good about who I am in a lot of ways. But then there's this, like, it's such a weird dissonance for sure. But we're coming up on about an hour, so I'm thinking we probably want to try to keep ours around an hour. And I know this is like our pilot, because we're just kind of like giving a shot and figuring it out. But I thought maybe we could kind of like talk a little bit about some of the logistics, as in like our intention is to go live once a week, and really just kind of talk about what like today, a lot of it is just kind of getting to know one another. And, in the future, we'll try on different topics, or maybe I don't know, we'll figure it out. And we're really hoping that the folks who listen will engage with us and maybe give us ideas or questions that we should answer. And a great way to do that is via our Patreon, which you can find in the description. There is a way that you could financially help support us, but don't worry about that. Because right. But there's also a way that you could even just freely sign up for it. But it's a good way to be able to connect with us and engage with us outside of just in the comments on YouTube or in the comments if you're listening on a podcast to us. Either way is great. But we're really just wanting to, build community and be a part of community, one with one another, but then also with other people. So we'd love to hear from folks on what we're going to do.
And I also want to add, I want to add to, this is a loving space. This is a space where we should be able to be comfortable and talk about those uncomfortable things, but we must, and I absolutely demand that we come in this space with respect.
Yeah.
So if you're coming in here with some disrespectful stuff, please don't come here, because it's
Bye-bye.
okay to ask uncomfortable questions, but it's not okay to be disrespectful of us for our time and our respect of wanting to help build one another and other people that have questions that want to be in our space. So please respect that. That's coming from my heart.
100. Yeah, I wholeheartedly. It's like it takes a lot for us to, and I'm not putting it out there like in some way to feel sorry for us, because it's also a privilege for us to get to do this as well. But like it's still a vulnerable, and also it's a great honor, to get to be able to even just do this,
Yeah.
So it's like an interesting balance. But and I know you're nervous. I'm nervous about this new venture that we're going on, but it's been on our hearts and our minds for about a year now.
Yeah, because if I wanted to write a book, I don't have to write a book. I can just put it all right here. Look at that.
Yeah. And so our intention is to go live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. So we're on Chicago time at 7 p.m. If for whatever reason, like this week, we have a scheduling conflict. So we actually aren't going to be like live during our regular live time. This is actually a pre-recorded episode. So from time to time, we will need to do this, but and then when we do air a recorded episode, we'll do it during our normal live time. And we'll also be in the comments as much as we can, at least one of us, to engage with you while you're watching as well. So be patient with us as we, move our lives around a little bit, and I don't know, just try to make this thing happen.
Yeah, I feel really good about this. So I would love to have everyone that we know and love and get to know a little bit more people to come and join us on Cut and Uncut.
All right. Well, until next time. Bye-bye.
Right? Bye.